Hello, Night Seekers, and welcome to Lacuna Noir. This is where forgotten stories and gentle voices meet, carrying you softly into peaceful sleep, wrapped in mystery. Before tonight's stories begin, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? Drop a comment below and let me know. And a little note before we begin. You may notice a few brief ads in the first 10 minutes, but after that, the rest of the video is completely ad-free. Just you, the silence, and the stories. So settle in, get comfortable, and let the night carry you. If you're drawn to these quiet, shadowed nights, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss a story when darkness calls. I collapsed onto the living room couch the moment I got home. My entire body hurt after another long week of climbing ladders, carrying tools, and crawling into spaces that had never been designed for a full-grown man. I pulled off my work boots and dropped them beside the coffee table before stretching across the cushions like a lazy pig. Linda hated when I left my dirty boots in the living room. She was always telling me to put them away, keep them on, or at least move them somewhere before she finally lost her patience and threw them into the rubbish. But Linda was not home. We had been married for 7 years, and everything we owned had been built through hard work. We did not come from wealthy families, and nobody had handed us anything. A few years earlier, Linda had started her own accounting firm. It began with a handful of small local businesses, but she was good at what she did. People trusted her, and the company slowly grew. She also handled most of the financial paperwork for my own business, mainly because she said my idea of organizing documents was throwing them into a drawer and hoping they sorted themselves out. She was not wrong. I had spent years working in industrial maintenance before deciding to start my own electrical maintenance company. I had learned enough by then to believe I could work for myself instead of making money for someone else. The first year had been difficult. The second was better. By the third year, I had more work than I could handle alone. I even had branded shirts made with my company name printed across the chest. J-Tech. I was not a millionaire, but Linda and I lived comfortably. We bought a quiet house in the suburbs, paid our bills on time, and could afford small holidays without spending the next 6 months regretting them. By the time I turned 37, I honestly could not ask for much more. That evening, Linda was at her weekly Pilates class. She normally attended one class, but sometimes she stayed for a second session with her friends. Afterward, they often went for coffee and talked for hours. That meant I had the house to myself. I took advantage of the opportunity by heating a frozen lasagna. Linda hated when I ate that kind of food. She said I already spent enough time eating rubbish while driving between jobs. Whenever we were both home, she tried to make sure we had something healthy. But that day was my cheat day. At least, that was what I told myself. Besides, if she did not see it, she could not complain. I ate the entire lasagna while watching television. When I finished, I carried the empty package outside and buried it beneath the other rubbish in the bin so there would be no evidence. On the way back through the kitchen, I noticed a purple sticky note on the refrigerator. Linda loved sticky notes. She put them everywhere. The bathroom mirror, my work bag, the dashboard of my van. Sometimes I found them attached to my lunch or stuck inside one of my boots. The note on the refrigerator said, "I'm going to be a little late tonight. We're doing a double session. Eat something healthy." I stared at it. "Who needs healthy?" I said, puffing out my chest. I felt like a child who had successfully hidden stolen sweets from his mother. Then I returned to the living room and dropped onto the couch. I loved Linda more than anything. She was the light of my life. But those sticky notes were eventually going to kill me. I stretched out in front of the television and placed my feet on the coffee table. After working all week, Doing nothing felt amazing. Linda would not return for another 2 or 3 hours. A double Pilates class would be followed by coffee, and coffee would become a long conversation. I knew her well. She knew me just as well. If she came home and found me lying across the couch with my boots on the floor and frozen food containers in the bin, she would treat me like a lazy teenager. I intended to clean everything before she returned. Unfortunately, exhaustion and a documentary marathon about the Second World War had other plans. My eyelids became heavier. I remember telling myself I would close them for only a minute. Then I fell asleep. I woke when someone pulled me from the couch. My body hit the wooden floor. Pain shot through my hip, and I opened my mouth to shout every curse I knew. Before I could make a sound, a small hand covered my mouth. "Jamie," Linda whispered, "there's someone in our house." My eyes struggled to focus. The room was darker than before. Evening had arrived while I slept, and the only light came from the television. Linda was crouching beside the couch. Her face was pale. She held one finger against her lips and stared toward the front door. My brain slowly caught up with the situation. "What?" I whispered after she removed her hand. "Someone came through the front door," she said. "They were looking for you." I rubbed my eyes and carefully raised my head above the back of the couch. A person stood near the front door. The figure had just closed and locked it. Then they dropped something onto the floor. It looked like a gym bag or backpack. "What the hell?" I muttered. "Who is that?" "I don't know," Linda whispered. The door just opened. She looked at me as though I should know what to do. "Go and see." "Of course," I breathed. "Send the electrician." I slowly stood. I had no weapon nearby, so I picked up the television remote. Even in that moment, part of me understood how ridiculous I looked. Unless the intruder was frightened of changing channels, the remote would not help. Still, holding something made me feel less helpless. I moved toward the figure, one careful step after another. The person reached down, picked up a small object, and threw it onto the cabinet near the entrance. It rattled like keys. Then, the person turned on the lights. "Oh my God, Jamie," Linda said, laughing. "Why are you sneaking around in the dark?" I stopped. Standing by the front door was Linda. She was dressed in her workout clothes. Her long brown hair was tied in a messy bun. A gym bag rested near her feet. She smiled at me while I pointed the television remote at her like a gun. "Linda?" I asked. "Yeah?" I looked over my shoulder. The other Linda was still crouching behind the couch. "Jamie?" She whispered. "Who is it?" My skin became cold. I looked back toward the front door. "What is this?" The Linda near the door frowned. "What's wrong with you? How are you standing there?" She looked down at herself. "What do you mean?" And there. I pointed toward the couch. The Linda hiding behind it raised her head slightly. "Jamie, who are you talking to?" she asked. The Linda by the door followed the direction of the remote. "There's nobody there." "Yes, there is." I pointed between them. "How can you be in two places?" Both women stared at me. "Jamie?" The first Linda whispered fearfully. "What do you mean, two places?" the second asked. "Linda?" I said. "Yeah?" Both answered at exactly the same time. My knees weakened. They had the same voice, the same face, the same small lines beside their eyes, the same wedding ring. There were two perfect copies of my wife inside the room. Yet they could not see or hear one another. The Linda by the front door moved closer and looked behind the couch. The other Linda pulled back in fear. "What are you staring at?" the first asked. "There's nothing there." I stepped away from both of them. My back touched the wall near the kitchen. "Jamie?" The Linda who had entered said, "You're frightening me." How can you be in two places at once? What are you talking about? Stay there, I said, raising the remote toward her. Please, don't come closer. She looked shocked. I had never spoken to Linda that way. We had argued before, like every married couple, but I had never pointed anything at her or shouted for her to stay away. The Linda behind the couch looked terrified, too. Jamie, what's happening? She asked. I don't know. My breathing became faster. This has to be a dream. I turned and ran into the kitchen. Both Lindas called my name in perfect unison. I ignored them. I wanted to wake up on the couch. I wanted to open my eyes and find that I had slept through the documentary. Instead, the nightmare became worse. A third Linda stood inside the kitchen. She was calmly cutting vegetables. The knife struck the chopping board in a steady rhythm. She looked up when I entered and smiled. Looks like you finally woke up. I could not speak. The knife continued moving. Tap, 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 my heartbeat began matching the sound. What? She asked. Why are you staring at me? I looked behind myself. The doorway was empty. I considered telling her that 2 more versions of her were in the living room, but I no longer trusted anything. The kitchen looked normal. The vegetables smelled fresh. The radio played quietly beside the sink. Every detail felt real. Jamie, she said, placing one hand on her hip. Don't tell me you ate that frozen rubbish again. I stared at her. The dream was too detailed. How did you get in here? She frowned. What do you mean? How did you get into the kitchen? I live here. No. I stepped closer. Who are the people outside? What people? Why are there so many of you? The playful annoyance left her expression. Fear replaced it. Jamie, what's wrong? The kitchen door slowly opened behind me. The Linda who had entered through the front door looked inside. Jamie, she said nervously, what are you doing? The woman at the chopping board stared past me. The door opened by itself. Both versions looked frightened. Both searched my face for an answer. Something inside me began to break. Shut up, I said. They became quiet. Both of you, shut up. My voice rose. Neither moved. The house became silent. Then a scream echoed from somewhere deeper inside it. Linda's scream. It was filled with pain. Linda, I shouted. Both women answered at the same time. Jamie, not you. Another scream came from the hallway. Linda, where are you? I ran out of the kitchen through the second doorway. One Linda remained beside the chopping board. The other stood frozen near the door. They watched me leave as though I were the insane person in the house. I entered the hallway and found another Linda. She leaned against the narrow table near the stairs. Her face was filled with rage. I had never seen her look so angry. Linda? I asked. Is that really you? Yeah, she said coldly. Were you expecting someone else? What? Maybe you were hoping your little girlfriend would come instead. I stared at her. What girlfriend? The woman you've been sleeping with. She grabbed the lamp from the table and threw it. I ducked. The lamp struck the wall behind me and broke. What the hell are you doing? I know you're cheating on me, she screamed. I saw her. I know everything. I've never cheated on you. Liar. I don't even know what you're talking about. You're not going to do this to me. She reached toward the table and grabbed a pair of long-handled scissors. My chest tightened. Put those down. Tears ran across her face. After everything we built together, how could you do this? I didn't. She pointed the scissors toward me. I had never cheated on Linda. Not once. I could not understand why this version of her believed I had. Maybe each Linda came from a different future. Maybe they were memories. Maybe I was seeing things that had not happened. None of those explanations made sense. Stay away from me, she said. I only want you to calm down. I took one step forward. She swung the scissors wildly. I jumped back. She could actually hurt me. Linda, listen to me. I don't know what this is about. You know exactly what you did. I didn't do anything. She raised the scissors above her head. I think you'd be better off dead. Then she charged. I turned toward the stairs. There was nowhere else to go. I took the steps 2 at a time. Linda followed. Her feet struck the stairs close behind me. I ran along the upstairs hallway toward our bedroom. If she caught me, she would drive the scissors into my back. I threw myself through the bedroom door and slammed it shut. The lock clicked. Linda struck the other side. Jamie. I backed away. Then a weak voice came from the bed. Jamie, is that you? I froze. Slowly, I turned. Another Linda lay in our bed. Her back was supported by several pillows. Clear tubes ran from a medical machine into one of her arms. Her body was painfully thin. Her once healthy face had become hollow. Dark circles surrounded her eyes. Her skin was yellow, and her long brown hair was gone. Bottles of medication covered the nightstand. Linda, I whispered, what happened to you? She gave me a weak smile. Don't you remember? Remember what? I'm dying. No, my voice broke. No, you're not. She looked confused. Jamie, we already talked about this. Tears filled my eyes. The doctor explained everything. The tumor cannot be removed. No. I stared at the woman in the bed. This was the 5th version of Linda I had seen in less than 10 minutes. But looking at this one hurt more than all the others. She looked exhausted. She also looked peaceful, as though she had accepted something I could not. My Linda isn't dying, I said. I am your Linda. No, this isn't real. She reached toward me weakly. Jamie, stop. You've been taking care of me for months. Shut up. She flinched. I hated myself for frightening her, but I could no longer control anything. You're not real. None of you are real. Her eyes filled with tears. I swept everything from the dresser. Linda's jewelry box fell to the floor. Necklaces, rings, and bracelets scattered across the carpet. Panic, grief, anger, and confusion became one feeling. I had to escape. Then I remembered the safe. The safe would not explain anything, but it might protect me. I crossed the room and entered the walk-in closet. Before closing the door, I looked back at the sick Linda. She was crying quietly. For a second, I wanted to return to her. Then the furious version struck the bedroom door again. I closed and locked the closet. The small ceiling light barely lit the narrow space. Clothes and shoes covered every wall. Linda had always wanted a walk-in closet. A few years earlier, I had rebuilt part of the bathroom to create one for her. It had 2 entrances, one from the bedroom and one from the bathroom. My Linda loved it. Not these copies. I began throwing clothes and boxes aside. I was searching for the safe. 6 months earlier, several neighbors had reported strangers walking through gardens at night. I had caught a man standing near our back fence, looking toward the house. After that, I bought a handgun. I had never liked guns, but I wanted something for protection. Finally, I found the small safe behind a stack of shoes. The code was Linda's birth year, followed by mine. A simple code from a simpler life. The lock opened. I took out the gun and the magazine. I always stored them separately. My hands shook as I pushed the magazine into the grip. The weight of the weapon made me feel connected to reality. The world where Linda and I were happy. The world where there was only one of her. The feeling lasted for 1 second. Someone knocked softly on the closet door. Jamie? Linda asked. Are you in there? I aimed the gun toward the door. This version sounded different. She was not weak like the woman in bed. She was not furious like the woman with the scissors. She sounded impatient and concerned. Jamie, answer me. What do you want? Oh, finally, she sighed. They're here to see you. Can you come out? Who? I don't know. Who is here? They're asking for you. I've never seen them before. I waited. Come out and speak to them, she said. Then there was silence. I could not remain in the closet forever. I placed the gun inside my waistband and lowered myself to the floor. My plan was simple. I would crawl through the second closet door into the bathroom. From there, I could reach the stairs and leave through the back of the house. I needed to get away. If I saw another version of Linda, I thought my mind might completely collapse. I crawled across the carpet. When I reached the bathroom door, I pushed it open. What waited on the other side was worse than everything before it. The bathtub was filled with dark red water. Linda floated inside it. Her skin was pale. Her arms rested on the surface. Both wrists had been cut open. Blood covered the water. She was not breathing. I stood and stared at her. Linda, my knees became weak. My wife was dead in our bathtub, the only woman I had ever loved, the woman with whom I had built my entire life. What is happening? The room spun. I moved toward the small bathroom window. I did not care how far it was from the ground. I would climb through it and slide down the pipe if necessary. Then I would find my real wife. We would leave. We would never return to the house. I unlocked the frosted window and pushed it open. The backyard was full of people. Dozens, possibly hundreds. They stood across the grass, beneath the trees and near the fence. All of them were men, but they were not strangers. Every person outside was me. One wore a doctor's coat. Another wore a military uniform. A man in an orange prison jumpsuit stood near the back fence. One version of me sat in a wheelchair. Another had only one arm. A blind version held a white cane. One had lost half his head. Blood covered the ground near his feet, but he remained standing. Some were old. Some were young. Several looked exactly like me in my J-Tech work clothes. A few had longer hair or thicker beards. Every single one was Jamie. Nobody moved. They stood silently and stared toward the house. They looked like figures waiting to enter a factory, waiting for their turn. What the hell? I could barely speak. The copies continued watching. Then my work phone began ringing inside my back pocket. I had forgotten it was there. With shaking fingers, I pulled it out. The caller's name appeared on the screen. Linda, I answered. Jamie, why haven't you been answering? Linda asked brightly. I almost dropped the phone. Linda, never mind, she said with a small laugh. You sound like you've just woken up. I'm on my way home from Pilates. Do you need me to pick up anything? I closed my eyes. This voice was different from all the others. I knew it immediately. This was my Linda, the real woman I had married. Are you really Linda? There was a pause. Of course I am. Her voice changed. The happiness disappeared. Jamie, what's wrong? Don't come home. What? Stay where you are. I looked at the dead Linda in the bathtub. Call the police. Go somewhere crowded. I don't care. Just don't come back here. Jamie, what happened? I can't explain. The hundreds of versions of me continued staring through the bathroom window. Please trust me, I said. I love you. The moment I spoke those words, the phone released a terrible scream. It sounded like an old radio moving across every frequency at once. I pulled it away from my ear. The noise felt as though something were tearing through my skull. Somehow, I knew the woman on the call had been real. I had heard my Linda for only a few seconds, and then something had taken her voice away. The static slowly faded. A different voice came through. Jamie? It was male, mechanical, emotionless. The words sounded as though a machine had built them from separate recordings. Are you there, Jamie? What is this? Finally, the voice said. I have reached you. Who are you? I cannot answer that question. What do you want? I have one question for you. I gripped the phone. What? The voice paused. Then it asked, "How are you still alive?" My body became cold. "What did you say?" "Please remain calm. Who are you?" Something does not match. The voice continued in the same flat tone. "According to our records, you died 3 years ago." I looked at the copies standing outside. Some were injured. Some were sick. Some appeared healthy. Perhaps every one of them had died in a different way. Perhaps each Linda belonged to a different Jamie. The dying Linda. The angry Linda. The Linda who killed herself. The Linda who entered the house normally after Pilates. Every version might have come from another life. Another possibility. Another world. "How are you still alive?" The voice asked again. "I don't know what you're talking about. You are Jamie Cole. Yes, owner of J-Tech Electrical Maintenance. Yes, married to Linda Cole for 7 years. Yes, you died 3 years ago. No, your death was confirmed. I am standing in my bathroom. That is why we are contacting you." The hundreds of Jamies outside began moving at the same time. Every head tilted upward toward me. I stepped away from the window. "What do you mean? You should not be active. I'm alive. That is the problem." The dead Linda's hand moved inside the bathtub. I looked toward her. Her fingers slowly curled over the edge. She turned her pale face toward me. Her eyes opened. "Jamie," she whispered. The voice on the phone continued. "Do not speak to the copies." The Linda in the bathtub sat upright. Blood and water poured from her body. She smiled. "You came back," she said. I raised the gun. "Stay away." Someone struck the bathroom door from the other side. Then another voice called through it. "Jamie, they're waiting." The angry Linda began hitting the bedroom door with the scissors again. The sick Linda cried from the bed. Downstairs, several more versions of my wife began calling my name. All their voices filled the house. Some sounded afraid. Some angry. Some loving. Some were screaming. I pressed the phone to my ear. What am I supposed to do? The mechanical voice was silent for several seconds. Then it answered. "Remember how you died." "I didn't die. If you cannot remember, the correction process will continue." "What correction process?" The call disconnected. The screen went black. Outside, the hundreds of Jamies began walking toward the house. Slowly, together, the dead Linda climbed from the bathtub. Water and blood moved across the bathroom floor. I backed into the closet and locked the door. The gun remained in my hand. All around me, versions of my wife called my name. Beyond the walls, copies of me surrounded the house. The only thing I knew for certain was that I was alive. I could feel my heartbeat. I could feel the cold gun in my hand. I could smell the blood and dirty water from the bathroom. Dead men did not feel those things. At least, I did not think they did. Then I looked down at my J-Tech shirt. A dark stain had appeared across the center of my chest. The fabric felt wet. I touched it. My fingers came away covered in blood. A memory entered my mind, not completely, only a flash, a ladder, a damaged electrical panel, a bright blue-white light, Linda screaming my name. Then darkness. The copies outside reached the back door. The handle began to turn. I understand now that the voice may have been telling the truth. Maybe I died 3 years ago. Maybe this life was never mine. Maybe I have been living inside a future that should not exist, while every other version of me continued without Linda or died in a different way. But I remember the past 3 years. I remember waking beside my wife. I remember starting J-Tech. I remember buying this house. I remember every purple sticky note Linda placed around it. Those memories feel real. If they belong to someone else, I do not care. I will not give them back. The closet door is shaking now. Several Lindas are standing on the other side. The bathroom door has opened. The copies of me are inside the house. The work phone has started ringing again. The caller ID says Jamie. I am afraid to answer, but I think I already know what the voice will ask. How are you still alive? I do not have an answer. I only know that I am. And whatever is outside this closet has come to correct that mistake. I have kept this story to myself for almost 8 years because I know exactly how it sounds. Whenever people online ask what would happen if Bigfoot were proven real, the comments quickly turn into jokes. Someone always says Santa Claus will be confirmed next. Another person mentions the Easter Bunny. Eventually, someone brings up the Tooth Fairy. Everyone laughs because those things are supposed to belong in completely different worlds. Creatures like Bigfoot are meant to hide in deep forests. They are treated as animals that science has not discovered yet. People can imagine them being real because the wilderness is large, dark, and difficult to explore. But Santa, the Easter Bunny, and the Tooth Fairy are childhood stories. They belong in picture books, cartoons, and conversations between parents and young children. They are not supposed to appear in government files. I do not laugh at those jokes anymore. In 2018, I worked as a field technician for a private company that handled data recovery for government wildlife agencies. We were not part of the military, and we were not officially connected to any intelligence service. On paper, our work sounded normal. We repaired damaged storage systems and recovered files from trail cameras, drones, motion sensors, tracking equipment, and environmental monitoring stations. Whenever a wildlife agency collected footage that was damaged or corrupted, they sometimes sent it to us. Most of the work was boring. We recovered thousands of hours of deer moving through forests, birds landing on cameras, bears scratching themselves against trees, and hikers doing things they probably would not have done if they knew they were being recorded. We also received unusual footage. People often believed they had filmed something supernatural, but almost every case had a simple explanation. A bear standing upright could look human from the wrong angle. A sick moose could move in a strange way. A starving coyote with most of its fur missing could look like something out of a nightmare. Hikers regularly reported skinwalkers, strange forest spirits, or creatures with human faces. In most cases, poor lighting and fear had changed the way they remembered what they saw. I thought every mystery had an explanation. Then, 3 separate wildlife agencies sent us footage of what they called unknown hominids. The recordings came from different states. The cameras were different models. The people involved had no connection to one another. The creatures in the footage were not bears. They were not people in costumes. The experts who examined the recordings could not explain them away. Nothing was announced publicly. There was no emergency news report. No president stood behind a podium and told the country that monsters existed. No newspaper published a photograph of Bigfoot on its front page. Instead, there were private meetings. Files were classified. Access rules changed. New security systems appeared in our building. Our funding increased, and our workload tripled almost overnight. People who had never visited our office began walking through the halls in dark suits. They asked questions without introducing themselves. Some of the employees who worked on the original footage were transferred without warning. The rest of us were told not to discuss what we had seen. I told myself the government was only being careful. If an unknown species existed, confirming it would cause panic, damage protected environments, and attract thousands of hunters and tourists. That explanation made sense. The folder I found later did not. One afternoon, I was recovering corrupted files from an old server. The system had been connected to a regional wildlife database, but much of its information was badly damaged. I had spent hours repairing broken directories and rebuilding lost file paths. Most of the recovered folders had ordinary names: migration patterns, predator activity, unknown hominid reports, environmental contamination. Then I found a folder that should not have been there. It was called Childhood Entities. At first I assumed it was a joke. Someone might have created it years earlier as a place to hide personal files or strange photographs. Employees sometimes gave folders ridiculous names to avoid attracting attention. I opened it. Inside were several more folders: Santa, Sandman, Pied Piper, Tooth Fairy. I remember laughing. The laugh sounded too loud in the empty room. I looked around to make sure nobody was watching me. Then I clicked on the Tooth Fairy folder. The first document was not a collection of stories. It was a biological assessment. The page looked like every official wildlife report I had ever handled. It included classification notes, estimated population information, diet, behavior, movement patterns, and warnings. At the top it said, species designation pending. Common civilian name, Tooth Fairy. Estimated global population, unknown. Diet, calcified juvenile human dentition. Preferred acquisition window, within 6 hours of natural tooth loss. I stopped reading. For several seconds I stared at the words, calcified juvenile human dentition. Children's teeth, I continued. Behavioral note. Exchanges objects of perceived value to reduce parental resistance and encourage future access. I read that sentence again. Then I read it a third time. The report did not describe the money as a reward for the child. It described it as a method of controlling the parents. Reduce parental resistance. Encourage future access. According to the file, the story of the Tooth Fairy was not a harmless tradition. It was an agreement. Parents placed the tooth in an easy-to-reach location. The creature entered the house. It took what it wanted. Then it left behind money or another small object, so the adults would continue allowing it to return. I should have closed the folder. Instead, I opened the photographs. The first image made me pull away from the screen. There was no tiny woman with wings. There was no dress, wand, or sparkling dust. The creature looked almost human when viewed directly from the front, but only because its face had 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth. Its body was extremely thin. The shoulders were narrow, and the chest seemed almost flat. Its skin was pale and tight, stretched over bones that looked too long for its body. Its arms reached nearly to the floor. Every finger ended in a transparent hook instead of a fingernail. The hooks looked delicate, almost like glass, but several photographs showed them cutting through cloth and wood without breaking. The face was worse. It had no lips. Its mouth was always open slightly, revealing rows of tiny white teeth. There were hundreds of them. Some were clearly human. I could see small baby teeth mixed among longer adult-looking teeth. Others came from animals. Some did not match anything I recognized. The wings were not covered in feathers. They were not shaped like insect wings either. They were made from stretched skin, similar to a bat's wings, but thinner and almost transparent. In some photographs, the wings wrapped around the creature's body like a second layer of skin. The report estimated that the creatures could flatten themselves until they were less than 2 inches thick. That explained how they entered locked rooms. It did not explain why anyone had allowed them to continue. Below every photograph, someone had typed the same warning in capital letters. Do not observe during collection event. The warning should have been enough. It was clear. It was repeated. I should have stopped. But by that point, curiosity had taken control of me. I continued reading. The oldest reports in the folder had been copied from handwritten documents. dating back hundreds of years. Similar stories appeared in countries that had no connection with one another. The creature's name changed from place to place, but the behavior remained the same. A child lost a tooth. The tooth was placed somewhere near the sleeping child. The family was told not to watch. By morning, the tooth was gone and a gift had appeared. Every culture had created some version of the same lie. Leave the tooth. Receive a reward. Do not stay awake. Children were being trained not to look. The report claimed the creatures did not need the teeth to survive. They wanted them. Researchers had studied teeth left behind after failed collection events. They believed children's teeth contained biological properties that adult bodies lost as they developed. There were notes about stem cells, calcium density, and rapidly dividing tissue. None of the scientists knew exactly why the creatures collected them. They only knew the behavior had continued for centuries. One theory suggested the creatures used the teeth to repair their own bodies. Another theory claimed the teeth were part of reproduction. A third report suggested that each stolen tooth allowed the creature to copy a small amount of information from the child. Memories, physical traits, possibly even identity. That theory had been marked as unconfirmed. I wish I had treated it that way. Instead, I downloaded the entire folder onto a flash drive. I knew I was breaking the rules. I also knew that if someone removed the files from the system, I might never see them again. I told myself I only wanted to study them at home. I told myself I would delete everything after I understood what I had found. That was my mistake. 3 nights later, my daughter lost her first tooth. I wish that part were not true. She had been excited about losing it for weeks. Most of her friends had already lost at least one, and she felt left behind. When the tooth finally came loose during dinner, she ran through the house holding it in her hand. My wife cleaned it and placed it inside a small plastic container until bedtime. Our daughter talked about how much money the tooth fairy might leave. I stood in the kitchen and felt cold. The photographs from the file returned to my mind. The long arms, the clear hooks, the rows of teeth. At bedtime, my wife placed the tooth beneath our daughter's pillow. I stood in the hallway and watched. My wife noticed my expression. "Are you okay?" "Yeah," I said. It was a lie. I could have taken the tooth away. I could have told them everything. But how could I explain it? I had stolen classified files from work. The files described something impossible. My wife would think I was joking, frightened, or losing my mind. I also wanted to know whether the report was real. That is the part I am most ashamed of. Some part of me wanted proof. That night, I stayed awake in the living room. I turned off every light and sat in a chair facing the stairs. I had brought home a pair of night vision binoculars from work. They rested in my lap. Midnight passed. Then, 1 o'clock. The house remained quiet. At around 2 in the morning, I began to think nothing would happen. Maybe the folder was part of a training exercise. Maybe someone had created fake documents to test security. Maybe I had risked my job for an elaborate joke. At exactly 2:17, every electronic device in the house shut down. The lights stayed on because they were already switched off. Anything with a processor stopped working. The television, the router, my phone, my laptop, even the digital watch on my wrist. The screen went black. A few seconds later, every dog in the neighborhood began whining. They did not bark. They made low, frightened sounds. It was the sound animals make when they know something dangerous is nearby but do not dare challenge it. Then I heard scratching. It was not coming from downstairs. It was inside the walls. The sound moved slowly through the house. Scratch, pause, scratch. Something was pulling itself through the insulation. I stood and picked up the binoculars. The scratching moved upward. It passed through the wall beside the staircase and continued across the second floor. Then it stopped directly above my daughter's bedroom. For several seconds, there was silence. Then I heard clicking, thousands of tiny clicks. The sound reminded me of fingernails tapping together, but faster and lighter. I ran upstairs. My daughter's bedroom door was open. I knew it had been closed. She was asleep beneath her blanket. The window was locked. Nothing in the room appeared disturbed. Then I noticed the ceiling. The attic access panel hung open. It was not slightly raised. It was completely down, leaving a dark square above the hallway near my daughter's bed. There was no ladder beneath it. No dust had fallen. There were no footprints. Only darkness. Then, two small white points appeared inside the opening. Eye sheen, I raised the night vision binoculars. I wish I had not. The creature was not inside the attic. It was hanging upside down from the ceiling directly above my daughter's bed. Its limbs were folded backward like a spider's legs. The wings were wrapped tightly around its body. Its head hung close to the pillow. The transparent fingers stretched downward. They moved beneath the pillow without lifting it. The hooks did not slide around the fabric. They passed through it. The fingers disappeared into the pillow as though the cloth were smoke. When they came back out, they held my daughter's tooth. The creature stopped moving. Its entire body became still. That was when I understood what I had done. I had looked directly at it. Every report had warned against observation. The creature's head rotated toward me. It did not turn in a normal way. The neck twisted a full 180 degrees, while the rest of the body remained facing the ceiling. Its lipless mouth opened wider. The rows of teeth separated. It was smiling. It knew I could see it. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then it reached toward my daughter's pillow and placed a $1 bill beside her head. The movement was slow and careful. It was not afraid. It was following rules. Rules older than my family. Rules older than the house, the country, and probably the stories people had created to explain it. Then, the creature whispered. The sound was not English. It was not any language I had heard before. The words were made from clicks, breaths, and soft sounds that seemed to come from several mouths at once. But somehow, I understood the meaning. Trade accepted. The creature pulled its limbs against its body. It became flat. Its bones seemed to fold over one another until the entire body looked thinner than a sheet of cardboard. Then it dropped from the ceiling and slid beneath the bedroom door. It did not pass through the gap under the door. It passed through the wood. It disappeared like one piece of paper sliding into another. I ran into the hallway. The scratching had already started inside the walls again. It moved down the stairs, across the living room, and toward the outside of the house. Within seconds, it was gone. The electronic devices turned back on. The router lights flashed. My watch showed 2:18. Only 1 minute had passed. The next morning, my daughter found the dollar beneath her pillow. She was delighted. My wife smiled and asked why I looked so tired. I said I had not slept well. As soon as I arrived at work, I reported everything. I did not report it because I expected anyone to believe me. I wanted someone to laugh. I wanted my supervisor to tell me the files were fake. I wanted him to explain that I had experienced sleep paralysis, stress, or a nightmare. Instead, he closed his office door. He pulled down the blinds. Then he asked one question. Did it leave compensation? I stared at him. Yes. How much? $1. He nodded slowly. Then your family is probably safe. Probably that word stayed in my mind. What does that mean? He did not answer at first. He asked whether I had copied the folder. I lied and said no. He stared at me until I placed the flash drive on his desk. He locked it inside a drawer. Then he explained what the warning meant. Observation changed the exchange. Under normal conditions, the creatures ignored witnesses who pretended to sleep. Parents could sometimes see movement, hear sounds, or notice shadows as long as they did not directly react. Direct eye contact was different. It marked the household. No one knew exactly what the mark meant. Some families never experienced another collection event. Others were not as fortunate. My supervisor opened a locked cabinet and removed a thin folder. He slid it across the desk. It contained missing child reports. Each case began after a parent interrupted or observed a collection. There were no signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, no broken windows. The children simply disappeared from locked bedrooms. Every missing child had recently lost a tooth. I quit that day. My supervisor did not try to stop me. He only warned me never to speak publicly about what I had seen. My wife and I moved across the country. I never told her the full truth. I said I had accepted a better job and wanted a fresh start. For years, nothing happened. Our daughter lost more teeth. Whenever one became loose, I took it after she fell asleep and destroyed it. Sometimes I burned them. Sometimes I crushed them into powder. Once I drove more than an hour and threw one into a river. No creature came. No money appeared. Eventually, her baby teeth were gone. I allowed myself to believe we were safe. My daughter is 16 now. Last week, she had her wisdom teeth removed. The dentist placed the extracted teeth inside a small clear bag and handed them to us. My daughter thought they looked disgusting. My wife wanted to keep them for some reason. I took the bag and threw it into a medical incinerator at the hospital before we drove home. I was not willing to take any chances. That night, nothing happened. Neither did the next night. By the end of the week, I began to relax. Then last night, I woke to a familiar sound, scratching inside the walls, slow, careful, moving through the insulation. I remained in bed. I did not turn on the light. I did not move. The scratching traveled around the room. It stopped behind the wall near my head. Then I heard thousands of tiny clicks. I closed my eyes and pretended to sleep. I stayed that way until morning. When the sun came up, the room was empty. The bedroom door was still locked. The windows had not opened. Nothing appeared disturbed. Then I noticed something on the nightstand. A silver dollar. I had never seen it before. The coin looked old. The surface was cold enough to hurt my fingers. Beneath it was a small, folded piece of paper. I did not want to open it. I already knew it was not from my wife or daughter. The paper was thin and pale, almost like dried skin. Inside was a single sentence written in dark, careful letters. Adult teeth are accepted with prior relationship. I read it several times. Then I understood. It had not come for the wisdom teeth. I destroyed those before it could collect them. The silver dollar was not payment for something it had taken. It was an offer. The original trade had never ended. When I looked at the creature 8 years ago, I created a relationship between us. My daughter was no longer the only person connected to it. I was. I checked my mouth in the bathroom mirror. All my teeth were still there. But one of them has started to move. It is the tooth at the back on the left side. It was perfectly healthy yesterday. Now it shifts whenever I press it with my tongue. My dentist says adult teeth do not simply become loose overnight without injury or disease. I did not tell him about the silver dollar. I did not tell him about the note. The scratching has started again as I write this. It is moving through the wall beside me. I can hear the tiny clicking sounds getting closer. I have closed every door and window. I know that will not stop it. The silver dollar is still on the nightstand. I tried throwing it away. It returned. I buried it in the garden. It was beside my bed the next morning. A few minutes ago, the loose tooth began bleeding. I can taste blood in my mouth. I think the creature is waiting for it to fall naturally. I also think it knows I am awake. This time, I will not look. I will not make the same mistake again. But there is something else written on the back of the paper now. It was not there this morning. I only noticed it after the scratching began. The sentence says, compensation increases when the collector is observed twice. It began the way these things usually begin, with my daughter coming home from school on a Friday afternoon and acting as though her entire future depended on me buying her a piece of plastic I had never heard of. Mom, I need a labubu. She stretched the word need until it sounded like she might stop breathing if I said no. I was standing in the kitchen, grating cheese over leftover spaghetti. I only half heard her at first. I thought she had said baboon, balloon, or perhaps some new word children had learned from YouTube. A what? A labubu, she repeated. She spoke with the tired patience of an 8-year-old who had just discovered that her mother knew absolutely nothing about the modern world. Everyone has one, she continued. Literally, everyone. I looked at her over the cheese grater. What exactly is a labubu? She dropped her school bag near the kitchen door and hurried over to explain. It's a little monster. But it's cute, creepy cute. It has big ears and fur, and it has these teeth. She pulled her lips back with both fingers, showing me her own small teeth. 9 teeth, she said. Sharp ones. Lovely, that is exactly what every child needs. A furry monster with a dental problem. She ignored the comment. For the next 10 minutes, she told me everything she knew about labubus. They came in blind boxes, which meant you paid money without knowing which one was inside. There were different collections, special editions, rare colors, hidden figures, and secret ones that people sold online for ridiculous amounts of money. She also told me that Sam from school said the ghost labubu could grant wishes or place curses. Apparently, Sam was not completely sure which one. This was the same Sam who had once convinced half the class that if they swallowed watermelon seeds, vines would grow inside their stomachs and come out through their mouths. I was not prepared to take his supernatural research seriously. Still, my daughter had that look. Parents know the look. It appears when a trend has completely taken over the playground. Your child becomes convinced that being the only person without a certain toy will destroy their friendships, reputation, happiness, and possibly their entire future. I tried explaining that not everyone in her school could possibly have one. She named 15 children who did. I reminded her that she already had shelves filled with toys she rarely touched. She promised this one would be different. She said she would take care of it forever. She said it could be her early birthday present. Her birthday was still 4 months away. By the time she finished, I knew I was going to give in. I am weak when it comes to my daughter. She knows this and uses it without shame. The following morning, we went to Pop Mart. The shop was crowded. Bright boxes covered every wall, each decorated with large eyes, strange smiles, and creatures that looked as though they knew secrets about the people buying them. My daughter went straight to one shelf. She picked up a box from the exciting macaron collection and held it carefully in both hands. This one, she said. How do you know? I can feel it. Feel what? That it's lucky. She turned the box slowly, studying every side as though the creature inside might send her a message through the cardboard. We paid for it. She could not even wait until we reached the car. She began tearing open the packaging in the shopping center car park while I searched through my bag for the keys. By the time I unlocked the doors, she was already holding the figure. Her excited expression disappeared. Oh, she said. It's only a normal one. I leaned closer to look. Normal was not the word I would have used. It had gray-brown fur, large pointed ears, and dark round eyes that looked slightly wet. Its mouth was stretched into a wide grin, showing the famous 9 sharp teeth. There was something unpleasant about that smile. The toy was not exactly frightening. Plenty of children's toys look strange, but this one looked as though it were enjoying a joke that nobody else could hear. It also had a dark smudge beneath its chin. I assumed it was dirt or a small manufacturing mark. I remember thinking I would clean it when we got home. My daughter held it close to her face. I'm going to call him Boo. From that moment, Boo went everywhere with her. He sat beside her breakfast bowl in the morning. He watched television from the arm of the sofa. He rested next to her books while she completed her homework. He watched me prepare dinner from the kitchen counter. Sometimes I would look up and find his dark eyes facing directly toward me. My daughter spoke to him constantly. At first, I thought it was normal childhood behavior. Children create personalities for their toys all the time. One of her old teddy bears had once worked as a dentist for 3 weeks. Another had been accused of stealing biscuits and spent 2 days in a toy prison made from a laundry basket. But Boo was different. She did not treat him like a toy she was pretending was alive. She treated him like a real friend who had moved into our house. One evening, she pushed the carrots around her plate and frowned. Boo doesn't like carrots. I glanced at the creature sitting in her lap. Well, Boo can start paying rent before he gets opinions about dinner. She looked at me, then lowered her eyes toward him. He says you're rude. I laughed. There was nothing else to do. Children say disturbing things without understanding why they sound disturbing. They have a strange sense of timing and no idea when a joke has gone too far. I told myself it was harmless. A few nights later, I woke at around 2 in the morning. There had been no loud sound. Nothing had fallen. No alarm had gone off. I simply opened my eyes with the strong feeling that something inside the house had changed. My body seemed to know there was a problem before my mind did. I remained in bed for a moment and listened. Rain tapped softly against the windows. The heating pipes clicked inside the walls. The refrigerator hummed downstairs. Everything sounded normal. I got up anyway. The carpet felt cold under my feet as I walked into the hallway. My daughter's bedroom door was slightly open. As I passed, I heard whispering. I stopped. At first, I thought she was speaking in her sleep. Then I heard the whispering again. It was too quiet for me to understand the words, but it was clear and careful. I pushed the door open with 2 fingers. My daughter was sitting upright in bed. Her legs were crossed beneath the duvet. Boo sat in front of her. Her back was straight, and her head was lowered toward him. She whispered something into the darkness. Then she stopped. She waited several seconds. After that, she nodded slowly, as though somebody had answered her. She whispered again. I stood in the hallway without moving. There was something private about the scene. I felt as though I had opened a door during a conversation I was not meant to hear. I nearly said her name. I nearly entered the room and took the toy away. Then she smiled at Boo. It was a small, secret smile. I quietly stepped back and returned to my room. The next morning, I gave myself several sensible explanations. She had been half asleep. She had been dreaming. She was playing with her new toy. Children often woke during the night and did strange things. Sensible explanations are easy to accept because the alternative is much harder to live with. That afternoon, I found her sitting beneath the large tree at the end of our garden. The tree stood too close to the fence. It dropped leaves, twigs, and bird mess across the grass throughout the year. My daughter was still wearing her school tights. Boo sat in the dirt beside her. At her feet was a destroyed bird's nest. Broken twigs covered the ground. Feathers were spread across the mud. Pieces of shell and soft gray down were mixed together. 3 baby birds lay in the center. Their small bodies were folded in unnatural positions. Their beaks were open as though they were still waiting for their mother to return with food. My stomach turned. "Oh, sweetheart," I said as I approached. The nest must have fallen. She did not look up. She ran one finger along Boo's ear, pressing the fur flat. "Yes," she said. Something about her voice made me stop walking. It was empty. She sounded neither sad nor frightened. Then she added, Boo didn't like the noise they made in the morning anyway. She said it as casually as though she were telling me the post had arrived. I stared at her. I waited for her expression to change. I wanted to see shock, sadness, guilt, or confusion. I wanted anything that looked like my daughter. She continued sitting beneath the tree. Mud covered her fingers. Boo's sharp smile pointed toward me. I wanted to grab him and throw him into the rubbish bin. I should have done it. Instead, I told my daughter to go inside and wash her hands. I buried the birds beneath the tree. Over the next few days, I began finding feathers inside the house. One was stuck to the windowsill in my daughter's room. 2 lay on the landing. A small, gray feather appeared on the bathroom floor. It was wet, as though someone had stepped on it after getting out of the shower. I told myself the feathers had entered on our clothes or shoes. The garden was full of birds. It was unpleasant, but not impossible. Then I found a pile beneath her bed. At first, I thought it was stuffing from an old toy. My daughter had destroyed several stuffed animals over the years and hidden the mess because she knew I would complain. I crouched beside the bed and reached underneath. My fingers touched something soft and damp. I pulled it into the light. The feathers were gray and brown. They had been pressed into a small bundle and stuck together with something dark. Then I saw the beak. It was tiny and crushed, almost completely hidden beneath the matted feathers. I dropped the bundle. For several seconds, I could not breathe. That evening, I asked my daughter to sit with me in the living room. I kept my voice gentle. Whatever was happening, she was still my child. She sat on the sofa with Boo tucked beneath one arm. His face appeared above her elbow, watching me. "I need to ask you about the birds," I said. She blinked. "The birds in the garden, and the feathers I found underneath your bed." Her eyes moved toward Boo. Then she looked back at me. "I'm not angry," I said. That was partly a lie. I was frightened, confused, and beginning to feel angry because fear had nowhere else to go. I only need to understand. She stroked Boo's head with her thumb. He didn't like them. "Boo didn't like the birds?" She nodded. "Did you hurt them because Boo asked you to?" For the first time, emotion appeared on her face. She looked offended. It was the expression of a child who believed an adult had misunderstood something very simple. "I helped him," she said. "Helped him do what?" "He said I could be his best friend." My mouth went dry. That was the moment I stopped pretending it was a normal phase. I waited until she was asleep that night. For almost 10 minutes, I stood in her doorway, listening to her breathe. Boo lay beside her pillow. His dark eyes faced the ceiling. I entered quietly and lifted him from the bed. For one strange second, he felt warmer than he should have. I almost dropped him. I told myself the warmth had come from lying beside my daughter. I carried him out of the room. I wrapped him in 2 pillowcases and taped them shut. Then I placed the bundle inside a shoebox. I put the shoebox into a black rubbish bag, tied it closed, and placed that inside another bag. I pulled down the loft ladder, and climbed up. The loft was filled with old baby clothes, Christmas decorations, boxes of photographs, and a broken fan we had planned to throw away for at least 6 years. I pushed the bag behind everything. There was no way my daughter could reach it. She hated the loft ladder. Even if she somehow climbed up, she would never find the box beneath all the rubbish. The following morning, she did not ask where Boo was. There was no crying, no shouting, no search through the house. She only watched me. She watched from behind her cereal bowl at breakfast. She watched while I helped her find her school shoes. She watched through the rearview mirror during the drive to school. Her expression was quiet and patient. It looked as though she were waiting for me to confess. By lunchtime, I could no longer stand it. I returned home and climbed into the loft. The box was in the exact place where I had left it. The tape remained sealed. The bags were still tied. Nothing looked disturbed. I took the box downstairs and opened it. The pillowcases were empty. There was only dust inside them and a weak smell of damp fur. That night, Boo was sitting on my daughter's desk. I did not think. I grabbed him, carried him downstairs, and marched into the garden. I treated him as though he were something infected. I placed him on an old metal shovel, poured lighter fluid over his body, and struck a match. The flames caught immediately. For several seconds, I believed I had solved the problem. The fur curled. The plastic skin beneath it blackened. The large ears began to bend and melt. Then the screaming started. It did not come from the garden. No neighbor opened a window. No dog barked. The sound was inside my head. It was high, sharp, and endless, like metal scraping against teeth or static forced directly into my skull. I covered my ears. It made no difference. The flames moved strangely. They did not rise and dance with the wind. They twitched in short, sudden movements, like small hands reaching upward. A metallic taste filled my mouth. It was the taste of touching a battery to your tongue. I remained beside the fire until there was nothing left but a black, melted lump on the shovel. When the remains were cool, I dug a hole beneath the large tree. I buried the ash where I had buried the baby birds. I packed the earth down firmly and placed a heavy stone over it. When I returned inside, the house felt too quiet. My daughter remained in her bedroom for the rest of the evening. She did not ask for water. She did not use the toilet. She did not come looking for another hug before sleep. At midnight, I went to check on her. She was lying flat on her back. Her eyes were open. I stepped closer. I said her name. She slowly turned her head toward me. It looked as though she had been waiting. "You made Boo angry," she said. Blood began running from her nose. It happened suddenly. One moment, her face was clean. The next, dark blood moved across her lips and down her chin. I rushed to the bed. I grabbed tissues and shouted her name. I tried to sit her upright. Before I could hold her properly, her entire body became loose. Her eyes closed. She stopped responding. The ambulance arrived quickly. I traveled with her to the hospital. She remained unconscious. The doctors ran tests. They checked for injuries, infections, poisoning, seizures, and problems inside her brain. They found nothing. Her heart rate was normal. Her breathing was normal. Her scans were clear. Her body looked as though she were sleeping, but she would not wake. She remained in the hospital for 4 days. I barely left her side. Doctors asked about her health, school, food, medications, and recent behavior. I did not tell them about Boo. I almost did. But what could I have said? A toy had spoken to my daughter. The toy had killed birds. I had burned it and heard screaming inside my head. A doctor would not believe me. They would think I had hurt my child. Perhaps I had. I had taken away the thing she loved. I had made it angry. On the third day, I returned home to collect clean clothes, her favorite blanket, and some books. The house felt cold, even though it was warm outside. I walked into her bedroom. Boo was sitting on the windowsill. He was clean. His fur was dry. There were no burns on his body. His ears were straight. All 9 teeth showed inside his smile. I did not scream. I think I had moved beyond screaming by then. I walked toward him and picked him up with both hands. He felt warm again. I carried him downstairs and opened the back door. I placed him carefully on the step. I did not threaten him. I did not try to burn him again. I did not call him a cursed little monster, although I wanted to. I knelt in front of him. "Please," I whispered. "Bring her back." His wet-looking eyes reflected my face. "Take me instead." The following morning, Boo was gone. The strange pressure inside the house was gone, too. The rooms no longer felt heavy. The air felt normal. My daughter woke later that day. The doctors called it a miracle. She did not remember the birds. She did not remember Boo. She did not remember becoming unconscious. She was tired, confused, and extremely hungry. For several hours, I allowed myself to believe everything was over. I brought her home the following morning. She laughed at something on television. She asked for toast. She hugged me so tightly that I cried into her hair. She seemed like herself again. My little girl was back. I am writing this because of what happened about an hour ago. She was standing in the hallway in her pajamas. She held one of her old teddy bears against her chest and rubbed her eyes. She looked half asleep. Then she stared past me toward my bedroom door. "I don't think you'll like the dark place," she whispered. My entire body became cold. "What did you say?" She yawned. "Where Boo lives when he isn't talking." I could barely breathe. "Why would I go there?" She hugged the teddy tighter. "He said you promised." Then she walked back to her bedroom. She climbed into bed as though she had said nothing unusual. I have had a terrible headache ever since. It began behind my eyes, but it is spreading. Sometimes the pain becomes so strong that my vision darkens. I keep hearing a soft scratching sound near my bedroom door. At first, I thought it was one of the trees touching the outside wall. Then I realized the scratching was coming from inside the room. I have not opened the door. I do not know what will happen if I do. My daughter is asleep now. I checked on her a few minutes ago. She was breathing normally. Her teddy bear was beside her pillow. But when I turned to leave, I noticed something beneath her bed. A small gray-brown ear was sticking out from the darkness. I did not reach for it. I did not call her name. I quietly closed the door. The headache is getting worse. There is a dark mark beneath my chin now. I noticed it in the bathroom mirror. At first, I thought it was dirt. I tried washing it away. It did not move. It looks exactly like the smudge Boo had beneath his chin when we first opened the box. A few minutes ago, I heard my daughter whispering from her bedroom. She said, "She's ready." Another voice answered her. It was quiet, but I heard it clearly. "No," it said, "not yet." The voice did not sound like a child. It did not sound like anything human. I am sitting on the edge of my bed now. The door is still closed. Something is moving on the other side. I can see a shadow beneath it. The shape has 2 long ears. I understand now that Boo accepted my offer. He brought my daughter back. He kept his side of the promise. Now, he expects me to keep mine. I do not know what the dark place is. I do not know whether it is somewhere beneath the house, inside the toy, or somewhere that does not belong to this world. I only know that Boo lives there when he is not speaking to my daughter, and tonight he has come to take me there. The bedroom door has started opening. I can see 9 small teeth smiling through the gap. Sorry to pause for just a moment. If this is your first time here, welcome. I hope you're enjoying the calm so far. If you'd like more nights like this, true stories, gentle rain, no interruptions, please subscribe to Lacuna Noir. It really helps me keep creating these peaceful experiences for you. And tap the bell so you're here every time a new story arrives in the dark. Now, back to the story. There is a long line forming outside my house. I do not know exactly what those people are waiting for, but I think I am beginning to understand. Forgive me. It started on a Monday, during the hottest week of the summer. I have always followed a strict morning routine. I started doing that sometime in high school, after I finally realized that sleeping 4 hours a night and surviving on 5 Pop-Tarts spread across an entire day was not good for my body or my mind. For years, I had been proud of my routine. I went to bed early. I took a shower, cleaned my room, checked the doors, fed my cats, and put on my noise-canceling headphones before sleeping. I usually woke around 6 in the morning, feeling rested. In the middle of July, 6 was almost exactly when the sun began to rise. That was one reason I preferred winter. I liked waking before the outside world became bright. Those dark morning hours gave me a feeling of privacy. Most people were still asleep. Nobody was thinking about me, looking at me, calling me, or expecting me to speak. For a little while, I existed without being observed. At least, that was how it used to feel. That Monday morning began like any other. I woke to the sound of my cats screaming outside my bedroom door. One of them scratched the wood while the other cried, as though I had forgotten to feed them for a week instead of a single night. I climbed out of bed, fed them, took a shower, dressed for work, and made coffee. The apartment was quiet, except for the cats eating, and the low hum of the refrigerator. I carried my coffee into the living room and walked toward the front window. The mug was warm between my hands. That was when I noticed the man. He stood at the end of my driveway, directly in front of the narrow concrete path that crossed the lawn and led to my front door. There was nothing remarkable about him. He wore comfortable clothes, the kind someone might wear when taking a long flight. Gray sweatpants, a dark hoodie, and clean trainers. His hair was wet, almost as though he had recently showered. For some reason, that detail bothered me. I had just showered too. I raised the coffee to my mouth and watched him through the glass. I did not recognize him, but that did not mean much. I barely knew any of my neighbors. I was polite when I saw them, but I usually kept to myself. The man did not have a dog, so he was not stopping during a walk. He was not carrying mail, newspapers, tools, or a delivery package. There was no sign that he had somewhere to go or something he needed to do. He was simply standing there. At first, I assumed he was waiting for someone to pick him up. Maybe a taxi was coming. Maybe a friend had told him to meet at the end of my street. I found my work bag where I had left it on the couch the night before. I checked that my laptop was inside, filled my water bottle, and pushed it into the side pocket. When I returned to the window, the man had not moved. He looked bored. He stared at the clouds, then at the pavement near his shoes. After a moment, he looked at something on his wrist that might have been a watch. I finished my coffee and placed the mug in the sink. Then, I opened the front door. Heat rolled over me immediately, even though it was still early. "Hey," I called. My voice sounded rough from sleep. I crossed my arms over my chest, holding myself as though the morning were cold instead of already becoming painfully hot. "Can I help you?" The man seemed surprised that I had spoken. He had been staring closely at a crack in the pavement. He raised his head and blinked at me. The silence between us stretched across the lawn. "No," he finally said. "I'm okay." I waited for him to explain. He did not. The silence became uncomfortable. My face grew hot, partly from the weather and partly from embarrassment. It was strange enough that he was standing outside my house at 7 in the morning. It was even stranger that he seemed unable to understand why I wanted to know the reason. "Okay," I muttered. I had never been good at confrontation. I locked the front door and checked it twice. The idea that he might be studying my house had crossed my mind. Maybe he was watching my routine or waiting to see when I left. But who would be foolish enough to do that openly? I had seen his face clearly. I could describe his clothes. If the house was robbed later, he would be the first person I told the police about. I climbed into my van and backed out of the driveway. The man appeared in my rearview mirror. He watched me drive away. He did not wave or step aside. He remained exactly where he had been standing. I told myself it was fine. It was only a strange event with a reasonable explanation that I might never discover. Later, I could tell Casey about it, and he would make some joke that made the whole thing feel harmless. The man would be gone by the time I came home. That would be the end of it. I arrived at work early, but I was almost always early. I sat in the break room and waited until it was time to clock in. About 10 minutes before our shift began, Casey walked through the door. He looked more tired than usual. Dark circles sat beneath his eyes, and his hair was messy and greasy. When he noticed me, he groaned dramatically and dropped into the chair across from mine. "Good morning," he said, stretching both words until they sounded painful. A small smile pulled at my mouth. Casey expressed every emotion with his entire body. He was loud, animated, and impossible to ignore. I was usually quiet and spoke in the same flat tone, no matter how I felt. Being around him was entertaining because I never knew which version of him would appear. He was one of the only people I truly considered a friend. We had met in that same break room several years earlier. He had decided almost immediately that we were going to be friends and never gave me much choice in the matter. Most days, I was grateful for that. The stress from the man outside my house faded a little. "You're not going to want to hear this," I said, "but you forgot your name tag." Casey looked down at his shirt. Then he threw his head back. "Shit, Megan is going to kill me." That's the third time this week. I checked the clock. We had 5 minutes. "Are you still getting those calls?" "Yes, they won't stop." He rubbed both hands across his face. I blocked the numbers. I called the phone company. Whoever it is keeps calling from new ones. They must be using burner phones. "You still think it's the customer from last month?" "Who else would it be?" Casey worked at the returns counter. A month earlier, a customer had brought in a destroyed phone and demanded a full refund. The device looked as though someone had smashed it with a hammer and then driven over it. Casey had refused. The customer became angry, followed him into the parking lot after work, and threatened him. Since then, Casey had been receiving calls from unfamiliar numbers at all hours. "All you did was refuse a refund," I said. "That phone was basically pieces of glass held together by wires." "I know." Apparently, he found someone else willing to buy it, because he can certainly afford new phones to call me from. It was almost time to begin work. I stood, and the memory of the man outside my house returned. The unexplained phone calls had reminded me. "I need to tell you something later," I said. "When is your lunch?" Casey could make anything feel less serious. He had a talent for turning fear into a story you could laugh about. I hoped he would always have that ability. When work ended, the sun hung low above the horizon. Orange light covered the parking lot. The day had felt long and stressful, like most workdays, but I still appreciated the purpose my job gave me. I liked being alone at home, but spending too much time alone was not good for me. Work forced me to speak, move, and exist around other people. Leaving was always difficult. One moment, I was surrounded by fluorescent lights, voices, music, and the sound of machines. The next, I was alone in my van while evening settled over the roads. I turned on the radio. The voices of presenters, advertisements, and news reporters filled the vehicle as I drove home. They comforted me. As soon as I turned onto my street, I knew something had changed. I felt it before I saw them. There were 6 people standing outside my house. The man from that morning remained at the front of the line. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, but otherwise he looked exactly as he had when I left. 5 strangers stood behind him in a straight line. They were dressed casually. They looked as though they had nowhere else to be. I pulled into the driveway. My hands shook against the steering wheel. The radio continued playing, but the voices had become meaningless noise. I remained inside the van with the engine running. Should I call the police? The idea made my stomach tighten. Dealing with police was one of my personal nightmares. I did not like confrontation, explaining myself, or asking strangers to believe me. Maybe this was a prank. Maybe it was some kind of social media challenge or group experiment designed to frighten an ordinary person. But why me? I could not think of anyone who hated me enough to arrange something like that. I usually stayed out of everyone's way. Eventually, I turned off the engine. I placed my work bag over my shoulder and climbed out. The strangers looked at me. "Excuse me," I called. My voice shook as badly as my hands. I moved closer, but not close enough for any of them to grab me. "What's going on?" 2 of the people looked at each other. A younger man, perhaps a few years younger than me, gave a tired shrug. "We're waiting," he said. He smiled politely. It was the kind of smile employees gave difficult customers after a long rush. The smile looked exhausted, but there was excitement beneath it. All 6 people shared that same expression. They looked tired. They also looked hopeful. "For what?" I asked. The young man looked around as though he wanted someone else to answer. Nobody did. "This is where we were told to wait," he finally said. My mouth opened. For a moment, I was too amazed to speak. He had answered as if that explained everything. I wanted to ask who had told them to wait. I wanted to demand that they leave. Instead, a strange sound came from my throat. It sounded like an injured animal. I walked up the front steps, entered my house, and locked the door behind me. The moment I was inside, my body seemed to shut down. I dropped my work bag and pulled out my phone. The cats appeared immediately, meowing and rubbing against my legs. I sat at the kitchen table and called Casey. He answered after a few rings. "Stop calling this number," he said. He sounded breathless. "I'm serious. If you call again, It's me." "Oh, I heard him running. Sorry, I thought it was that guy again." "What's up?" I swallowed and tried to arrange my thoughts. "You remember the man I told you about? The one standing outside my house this morning?" "Yeah, he's still here." Casey stopped running. His breathing remained loud through the phone. "And there are more people now," I continued. "Are you serious?" "Yes. For some reason, I felt close to tears. I hated that feeling. I did not want to sound weak or helpless, but my anxiety had already taken control of my body. I needed someone else to see the same thing. I needed proof that my fear made sense. "Stay there," Casey said. "I'm only a few blocks away. I'll come over." Okay, I almost told him to be careful, but the people outside had not threatened anyone. They were only standing. "Thank you." I waited near the front window. Some of the people had sat on the curb. Others checked their phones. The first man spoke excitedly to an older woman behind him. While I watched, 2 more people arrived from farther down the street and joined the end of the line. Casey came jogging up the driveway several minutes later. He stared at the people. They stared back. Several leaned close to one another and whispered. I unlocked the front door and let him inside. He was covered in sweat. His hair looked even worse than it had that morning. You weren't joking, he said, looking through the blinds. No, I began walking back and forth across the room. Why would I joke about this? I don't know. Maybe you wanted to scare me. When have I ever done that? A grin appeared on his face despite the fear in mine. I thought maybe you were trying something new. Casey, sorry, he looked toward the ceiling and thought for a moment. Let's call the police. The patrol car arrived around 20 minutes later. A heavy-set, bald officer with a blonde mustache stepped out. He looked exactly like the kind of person people imagined when they heard the word police officer. He walked toward the house while repeatedly glancing over his shoulder at the line. I explained everything. I told him about the first man, the others who had joined, and the useless answers they had given me. Following Casey's advice, I said several times that I was concerned for my safety. It's like talking to a doctor, Casey had whispered before the officer arrived. Make it sound serious, so they have to take it seriously. The officer agreed that the situation was unusual. Give me a minute, he said. I'll try to get some answers. Casey and I watched from the doorway. The officer approached the front of the line and spoke to the first man. Their mouths moved, but we could not hear the conversation. The man nodded. The officer shrugged. Everything looked calm and ordinary, as though strangers forming a line outside someone's home was not urgent or frightening. The officer spoke to several more people. Then he returned. Here's the situation, he said. They aren't very talkative. My best guess is that this is some kind of prank or social experiment. Why are they doing it outside my house? I asked. I don't know. Can you tell them to leave? Casey asked. The officer sighed and said something quietly into his radio. They're standing on public property. They're inches away from my lawn, I said. My voice came out higher than I wanted. They're in front of my house. He gave me a sympathetic nod that did not feel completely real. I understand. Unfortunately, I can't force them to leave unless they threaten you, damage something, block access, or step onto your property. They are frightening me, I understand. But he had already begun separating himself from the situation. If they do anything else, call us again. He returned to the patrol car. I watched him leave. Casey stood beside me, shaking his head. He stayed until it became dark. The streetlights came on, lighting the figures along the pavement. None of them left. I'm sorry, Casey said. I have to go home. I need to feed my dog and try to sleep. My throat tightened. I wanted to ask him to stay. I wanted to beg, but I did not want to seem desperate. I'll call first thing in the morning, he said. Tell me immediately if anything changes. I nodded. He studied my face. He looked guilty. I'm okay, I said. Are you sure you want to walk home? I can drive you. I was thinking about the people outside. Then I remembered the threatening calls. Maybe Casey was afraid too. I'll be fine, he said. I'm fast. I'll run. He laughed weakly. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow. He stood awkwardly near the door before giving me a strange handshake and slapping my palm. My hand was probably sweaty, but he did not react. I appreciated that. After he left, the house became painfully quiet. I switched on every lamp. I closed all the blinds. I checked the front door, the back door, and every window twice. Then I went to bed with my headphones on, hoping everything would be normal when I woke. It was not. The moment I opened my eyes the next morning, dread closed around me. I went to the window. More than 70 people now stood along my street. I left the house and walked down the driveway, staring at them in disbelief. Some had brought folding chairs. Several people slept against the curb or beneath blankets. Others stood awake. bouncing on their feet with nervous energy. The line followed the curve of the street and disappeared around the bend. I could not see where it ended. My mind felt close to breaking. I forced myself to walk along the line. I looked carefully at every face, hoping to recognize someone. I knew none of them. Some people were willing to speak. Others looked away when I approached. I asked the same question again and again. What are you waiting for? Nobody gave me a clear answer. I'm here for my son, one woman told me. I need another chance. What happened to your son? She shook her head sadly and refused to say more. A different woman leaned closer, as though sharing gossip. They think being first means they'll be chosen first, she said. I don't think that's how it works. Still, arriving early probably helps. It shows how badly you want it. Want what? She turned away. One man began crying the moment I focused my attention on him. The people around him rubbed his back and whispered comforting words. I was walking toward my house again when someone grabbed my sleeve. A woman stared at me with wide, watery eyes. Her fingers trembled. It'll happen soon, she whispered. The people around her turned toward us. Their expressions darkened. You know what to do, the woman continued quickly. I know you know what to do. I pulled away and ran. I slammed the front door behind me and locked it. My phone showed 2 missed calls from Casey. I called him. He answered immediately. John, I was worried. You're always awake by now. I'm okay. I was still breathing hard. There are hundreds of people now. They go all the way down the street. Oh my God. They won't tell me what they want. I paused. Why are you awake so early? Casey became quiet. I didn't sleep much. Why? I kept feeling like someone was inside my house. My stomach tightened. Casey, I know, it sounds stupid. No, it doesn't. Are you coming to work? I walked through the hallway simply because I needed to move. I guess. I don't know what else to do. Casey let out a breath of relief. I'll see you there. When I returned to the living room, I nearly screamed. A man stood directly outside the window. Both hands were pressed against the glass. His face was close enough that I could see the lines around his eyes. He was peering into my home. The moment he saw me, he ran. I watched him return to his place in the line almost 5 houses away. The next few days kept me in a constant state of fear. The line continued growing. When I drove home from work, I began passing the end of it 5 minutes before reaching my driveway. Then 6 minutes. Soon, the number of people looked large enough to fill a small town. I called the police several more times. Eventually, officers tried to move the crowd. They warned people about loitering and ordered them to leave the area. For a few minutes, it worked. People folded chairs, gathered bags, and walked away. The relief I felt was so strong that I nearly cried. But once the police cars disappeared, the people returned. On my days off, I remained inside with the blinds closed. Every few minutes, I checked the window. I did not know what would frighten me more, a change, or no change at all. The atmosphere outside was becoming heavier. From the beginning, there had been a quiet excitement among the people. Now that feeling had grown into something almost physical. Anticipation filled the street. They were waiting for an event. And whatever it was getting closer. The following Wednesday, Casey called while I lay awake in bed. It was around 10 at night. I had once been asleep long before then, but my routine had collapsed. John, he said. I sat up immediately. His voice sounded wrong. He was usually confident, energetic, and loud. Now he sounded small. What happened? I heard what might have been a whimper. Can I come over? Of course. Can I sleep at your place? Yes. What's going on? There's someone in my house. I know it. My heart struck hard against my ribs. You have to believe me, he said. I do. I'll be there in 10 minutes. He ended the call. The next 10 minutes felt endless. I watched through the window and waited for his headlights. For the first time since the line appeared, I hardly noticed the people. When Casey's car entered my driveway, I opened the door. A sound began somewhere in the middle of the line. One person started cheering. Then another joined. Within seconds, the entire street filled with applause and shouting. Hundreds of people clapped as Casey approached my house. I pulled him inside and locked the door. He did not look like himself. He repeatedly dragged his fingers through his hair and licked his lips. His eyes moved rapidly around the room. If I had not known him, I might have thought he was under the influence of something. His phone rang. The sound made both of us jump. He stared at the screen. Then he threw the phone onto the kitchen floor. It shattered. "Okay," I said slowly. I placed my hand against his back. "Let's sit down." We watched television. Neither of us paid attention to what was playing. The line continued cheering outside for several minutes before slowly becoming quiet again. I kept looking at Casey. Eventually, his shoulders lowered and his breathing became slower. Around 2 in the morning, he fell asleep with his head partly resting against my shoulder. I carefully lowered him onto the couch. I covered him with a blanket. Then I went to my bedroom. I closed the door quietly so I would not wake him. About an hour and a half later, cheering woke me. My noise-canceling headphones had fallen from my head while I slept. The sound outside was muffled by the walls, but it was loud enough to pull me from sleep. I sat up and rubbed my eyes. For several seconds, I did not understand what was happening. Then I remembered Casey sleeping on the couch. A noise came from the kitchen. I climbed out of bed. The floor felt warm beneath my feet from the summer heat. The cheering outside continued like canned laughter behind a television show. The sound twisted my stomach. I walked into the kitchen. The broken pieces of Casey's phone still covered the floor. But other things had changed. Half the drawers were open. Their contents had been thrown across the counters. A chair lay on its back. I heard movement from the living room. My head turned so quickly that my neck cracked. A man stood in the darkness. He wore a black rain jacket with the hood raised. He reached for the zipper. Our eyes met. He pulled the zipper upward, covering the lower half of his face. But I had already recognized him. He was the angry customer from the store. The man whose phone Casey had refused to refund. The man who had followed Casey into the parking lot and threatened him. The man who had been calling him for weeks. He dropped something. It struck the rug with a heavy sound. Then he ran toward the back window. The window was open. I must have forgotten to lock it. He climbed through and disappeared. Fear kept me frozen. I did not chase him. I looked at the object he had dropped. It was one of my kitchen knives. The blade was covered in something dark, thick, and red. My eyes moved toward the couch. Casey's hand hung over the armrest. It did not move. I knew he was dead before I walked around the couch. His face was pale and loose. His eyes were partly open. Blood soaked his shirt and the cushions beneath him. I fell to my knees. When the police arrived, I was still in front of the couch. My face was pressed against Casey's chest. My clothes were soaked in his blood. I could not make myself move. I repeated the same words again and again. Forgive me. Forgive me for going to bed. Forgive me for leaving you alone. Forgive me for wearing the headphones. Forgive me for not saving you. 3 officers had to carry me outside. My legs would not support my weight. The moment they brought me through the front door, the cheering became louder. It rolled down the entire street. The sound was rough, joyful, and unbearable. Under the streetlights, I saw the faces of the people in the line. Some smiled brightly at me. Others looked heartbroken. They looked as though they already knew what had happened. The officers placed me inside a patrol car. Everything seemed to move slowly. The vehicle pulled away. Ambulances arrived at my house without sirens. The cheering replaced every other sound. Then a person near the middle of the line began rising. An invisible force lifted them from the pavement. They floated higher and higher above the crowd. The others looked up. That person had been chosen. The cheering slowly stopped. Some people screamed in anger. Others fell to their knees. A few pulled at their hair or cried. Many only watched. Then the world began to change. My house flickered. The walls moved like a reflection on water. For one moment, it was still my home. Then, it became something else. The entire neighborhood shifted. The street filled with cars. The small houses stretched upward into apartment buildings. Glowing windows appeared high above the ground. We were suddenly in a city I did not recognize. My home had become a tall apartment building. The people, the line, and the person floating above them remained. But everything around them was different. Later, I sat inside a holding cell. I felt nothing. I was no one. The police asked whether I wanted to call someone. I did not answer. There was nobody I wanted to call. I could only think about what I might have done differently. If I had remained on the couch, Casey might still be alive. If I had taken his fear more seriously, I might have checked the windows again. If I had not worn the headphones, I might have heard the man entering. If I had stayed awake for only another hour, my best friend might still be alive. Someone began speaking to me. At first, I did not notice. Then a hand touched my arm through the bars. "You failed," a quiet voice said. Nothing changed. I raised my head. A man stood outside the cell. He might have been a police officer without a uniform. But there was something strange about him. Even while looking directly at his face, I could not understand what he looked like. My mind could not hold his features. I nodded. It was the only response I could manage. I wanted to go back. I wanted to return to the previous night. I wanted another chance. If I could try again, I would not leave Casey alone. I would save him. "It's all right," the man said gently. He reached through the bars and took my hand. "You can try again." I stared at him. "Do you remember me?" I shook my head. He removed a black marker from his jacket. Then he began writing on the back of my hand. I did not stop him. "Go to this address on this date," he said. The words on my skin included a date and a location. "Wait there. If you are chosen, you won't remember this conversation. You won't remember anything. You'll be returned to a point before it happened." He spoke slowly, as if explaining something to a child. His eyes searched my face for recognition. He found none. "If you speak to anyone while waiting, you cannot tell them why you are there." He continued. "You cannot help them change what they need to change. They have to understand it on their own." He smiled. His face looked kind, but something about the smile was too sharp. It reminded me of the point of a knife. "Good luck, John," then he disappeared. I am home now. My real home. Not the changing place I saw after Casey died. I was released on bail and placed under house arrest. I am still a suspect. My lawyer says he is hopeful. He believes that if the court allowed me to return home, the police must know I did not kill Casey. I have not washed the writing from my hand. I keep staring at the address and date. The date is 1 week from now. My court hearing is several days later. I do not know whether I will go. I do not know whether being chosen would really return me to the past. I do not know whether anything would change. Maybe I would make the same choices. Maybe Casey would still die. Maybe I would always go to my bedroom, close the door, and place the headphones over my ears. I think cowardice is part of who I am. Maybe that is what the man wants me to understand. Maybe the people in the line were not waiting for a prize. They were waiting for another chance. The first man outside my house may have failed someone too. The woman who spoke about her son may have lost him. The crying man may have made a choice he has spent years wishing he could change. The woman who grabbed my sleeve told me that I knew what to do. She recognized me because she had seen me before. Perhaps she had already watched this happen. Perhaps we all had. The line was not outside my house because I was special. It was there because my house was the place where something terrible was going to happen. They were waiting for the moment when my life broke. They knew someone would be chosen after it happened. And now I have been given the same instructions they were given. Go to an address. Stand in line. Do not explain. Wait to see if I am chosen. If I go, I might wake one morning without remembering any of this. I might find myself standing outside a stranger's home, wearing comfortable clothes, checking the time, and waiting for something I can no longer name. The person who lives there may come outside and ask whether I need help. I will have to tell them no. They may demand to know why I am standing there. I will only be able to say that I was told to wait. Then, as the hours pass, more people will arrive. We will stand together outside that home while the person inside becomes frightened. We will know that something is coming. We will know that someone is about to die. We will know that the person inside has a chance to stop it. But we will not be allowed to warn them. They have to understand it alone. That is the rule. I do not know who made the rule. I do not know why suffering has to happen before anyone can be given another chance. I do not know why the person must forget what they are trying to change. Perhaps remembering would make it too easy. Perhaps we are being tested. Or perhaps the thing choosing people enjoys watching us fail repeatedly. The address is still on my hand. Sometimes, late at night, I imagine myself going there. I see a house I do not recognize. I see one person standing outside it. Then another arrives. I take my place at the end. The owner looks through the window. For a moment, our eyes meet. They come outside and ask what I am doing there. I want to tell them everything. I want to say that somebody they love is going to die. I want to tell them to check every window, lock every door, and never leave their friend alone. But the warning refuses to leave my mouth. I'm waiting, I say instead. They ask what I am waiting for. This is where I was told to wait. They become angry. They go back inside. Hours later, the cheering begins. I see Casey every time I close my eyes. Sometimes he is sitting beside me in the break room, complaining about his missing name tag. Sometimes he is jogging up my driveway, staring at the line. Sometimes he is asleep with his head against my shoulder. Most often, I see his hand hanging over the side of the couch. I hear his voice asking whether he can stay with me. I hear myself telling him that I believe him. But believing him was not enough. He trusted me. He came to my home because he thought it was safe. I left him alone. I have tried to wash the blood from the couch, but the stain remains. The police took the knife and most of the cushions as evidence. The living room now feels hollow. Sometimes I sit on the floor where I found him. I repeat the same words. Forgive me. The cats avoid that room. At night, they stand in the hallway and stare toward the back window. I have checked the lock repeatedly. It is secure now. Too late. Everything is secure when it no longer matters. My lawyer tells me not to discuss the line. He says the police already think I am unstable because of the way they found me. He believes talking about floating people and changing streets will damage my case. I understand. I have told nobody about the man in the holding cell. I have told nobody about the address. but I am writing it here because I am afraid I will forget. If I am chosen, the man said, I will remember nothing. I may return to a time before Casey died and have no idea that I am supposed to save him. That is the part I cannot understand. How can I change anything if I do not remember? Maybe a part of me will know. Maybe the fear will remain, even if the memory disappears. Maybe I will wake with the feeling that something terrible is coming. Maybe I will stay on the couch without knowing why. Maybe I will check the back window one more time. Maybe that will be enough. Or maybe I have already tried. Perhaps the line had formed outside my house before. Perhaps Casey has died many times. Maybe every attempt ends with me sitting in the same holding cell while the same man writes another address on my hand. There is no way to know how many chances I have already received. That thought frightens me more than anything else. What if I have failed him 100 times? What if cowardice is not something I can change? What if every version of me eventually puts on those headphones? The date is getting closer. Each morning, I stare through the window. The street is empty now. There is no line outside my house. The first man is gone. The old woman is gone. The crying people, the folding chairs, and the thousands of tired faces have all disappeared. They received what they came for. One of them was chosen. I do not know whether that person succeeded. Perhaps somewhere at this moment, another line is beginning. One stranger stands at the edge of a driveway. The person inside the house watches them through the window and wonders what they want. Soon, more people will join. The cycle continues. My name may be next. I keep telling myself I will not go to the address. I tell myself it is dangerous. I tell myself the strange man could have been a dream created by shock and grief. I tell myself the words on my hand could have been written by me. But I know my own handwriting. This is not mine. And deep inside me, beneath the fear and guilt, there is something else. Hope, a terrible kind of hope. The possibility that I could hear Casey's voice again. The possibility that I could walk into the break room and tell him he forgot his name tag. The possibility that he could groan, throw his head back, and complain that Megan was going to kill him. I would listen to him, complain about the phone calls. This time, I would take them seriously. I would make him report the customer. I would make him stay somewhere safe. I would replace the lock on my back window. I would keep every light on. I would remain awake beside him until morning. I would not wear the headphones. I would not leave him. I would save him. At least, that is what I tell myself. But I told him I believed him the first time, too. And still, I failed. There are 6 days left now. The address remains on my hand. I've memorized it, but I am still afraid to wash it away. Every night I dream about the line. In the dream, I am standing at the front. A house sits before me. Through the window, someone watches. I cannot see their face. They open the door. Can I help you? They ask. I want to tell them the truth. Instead, I hear myself answer. No, I'm okay. Then I check the time and wait. Look, if you're still watching, you already know what this channel is. No jump scares, no fake drama, just real stories about real people who survive things most of us can't even imagine. And that's scarier than any movie could ever be. If you want more of this raw, unfiltered truth, told the way it deserves to be told, subscribe to Lacuna Noir. We're not here to waste your time. We're here to tell the stories that actually matter. Thanks for listening. Now go get some sleep, if you can.